studios in New York City. This is Charlie Rose.
Clint Eastwood is here. He has defined his career as a filmmaker with risky pictures. Here is a look at some of his work as a director.
Now, we've got to talk.
Have I done something wrong?
I'm just trying to be straight with you, that's all.
Oh, be nice to me instead.
Jesus Christ.
I don't understand. Are you trying to say you don't love me anymore?
I never told you that I loved you.
The ambush, what would it cost us?
Sheriff, I don't know as if I really like this town that much.
Well, this is a God-fearing town. These God-fearing people.
You like him, you save him.
Fill the cup, and in the fire of spring, your winter garment of repentance fling. The bird of time has but a little way to flutter, and the bird is on the wing.
It's a hell of a thing, killing a man. You take away all he's got, and all he's ever gonna have.
Yeah. Oh, I guess they had it coming.
We all have it coming, kid.
We're hardly two separate people now. And, some people search all their life for this and never find it. Others don't even think it exists. You're gonna tell me that this is the right thing to do? Giving it up?
My own little daughter, and I can't even cry for her. Jimmy. You're crying now.
Damn. Excuse me if I didn't want my fighter spending the second half of his life cleaning up other people's spit.
Yeah, right. Right, you're the smart one. You're the one learning Greek.
It's Gaelic.
Well, you just protected yourself out of a championship fight. How do you say that in Gaelic?
After his 2005 Oscar for Million Dollar Baby, Clint Eastwood has turned his attention to World War II. He has two films in theaters this fall, Flags of Our Fathers and Letters from Iwo Jima. Here is a look at both.
Tonight's guest of honor is from the Empire of Japan.
How would you feel if America and Japan were to enter war?
The United States is the last country in the world Japan should fight. 本日付で私は自分の兵が待つ任地へと向かう。国のため忠義を尽くし、この命を捧げようと決意している。
おめでとうございます。召集令状です。
ありがとうございます。お国のため精一杯ご奉公してまいります。
もはやこの島は孤立したも同然だ。
メリケンの勉強しておられるんだよ。だからどうやったら打ち負かせるかも知ってんだよ。
地下要塞を構築する。地下に潜って徹底抗戦だ。明日か。祖国のため。我々は最後の一兵になろうと。この島で敵を食いとどめることが責務である。生きて再び祖国の地を踏めることなき者と覚悟せよ。行きましょう。撃て
So far, Letters from Iwo Jima has earned Eastwood Picture of the Year awards from both the LA Film Critics and the National Board of Review. I am pleased to have him back on this program. Welcome.
Thank you, Charlie.
Nice to see you. How are you?
Yeah, good. I'm good.
Feeling good?
Yeah, I feel fine. I feel
fine. Two pictures back to back. Here's what you said. This is a quote recently. Every movie I make teaches me something, and that's why I keep making them. I'm at the stage of life when I could probably stop and just hit golf balls. But in filming these two movies about Iwo Jima, I learned about war and about character. I also learned a lot about myself. When did you learn about war?
Well, going back to the first part of your question about the golf balls, after hitting golf balls for quite a few years, I realized that I was never going to be anything more than mediocrity there. So moving on to war.
And you're better than I am. So.
I'll tell you, it's one of those games that you never conquer. You just kind of flirt around
Exactly.
with, you know. It's like,
but it's nice if you have your own course, though.
Yes, that helps. But as far as the war is concerned, World War, much has been written about World War II and the Greatest Generation, and in recent years, and I think it was important to revisit that particular era at this time in history, and just I was hoping that a lot of young people might look at it as a chance to see what their fathers and forefathers did, and their mothers and the sisters did as far as backing up the war. The fact that everybody just came out of the Depression in the 30s and then just went into the 40s, and all of a sudden they're in World War II, and it became a time when Americans were asked a lot of, and they responded very vigorously and with great spirit. And so I just thought it was a chance for people to see what that was like. And Flags was a very interesting period, and that whole Bond period, which I remember very much as a kid, was a fascinating time. And then in the preparation for that film, I became curious about why was the battle for Iwo Jima. It turned out to be the toughest battle in Marine Corps history. So I figured, why was that? And so I started studying a little bit about this General Kurobayashi, who ran the campaign on the island, and figured up the rather unique defense that they had. And so I ended up with a story on each one. So I went off to film with two scripts in my hand, and I did when I finished Flags of Our Fathers, and while I was in the editing process, taking a little hiatus there, I filmed the other one.
All right, let me ask you a couple of things about this. It is said, I want to come back to what you said you've learned about war, about character, and about yourself, but looking at the making of this film, it is said that Steven Spielberg was with you at an Oscar backstage event and came over and said, or you knew he had bought the rights to Flags of Our Fathers, or at least you wanted it, and what happened? Well,
I had tried to buy it when it first came out, James Bradley's book, which is unraveling the mystery of his father and what his father did during the war. But then I kind of, when it was bought by DreamWorks, I kind of forgot about it. And then I was, a few years ago, I was backstage. In fact, when Sean and Tim prevailed on Mystic River, and I was backstage, I ran into Steven, and Steven says, why don't you come over and do Flags of Our Fathers with us? And I said, okay. It was that quick. We just shook hands, and that was the deal. And then after we had meetings, and I managed to get Paul Haggis to write the script, who has been writing $1 Million Baby, which I was just going into. I kind of got settled down and did and thought about this General Kurobayashi and the defense of the island, and it was very. It just seemed, as I went along and you learn more about it, it seemed nice to tell both sides of the story. It all boils down to pretty much the same thing, is that a lot of young men who would rather be home in the comfort of mom and dad or loved ones, and a
wife and children.
And wife and children, and not having that opportunity.
Wars fought by, decisions about war made by old men, and young men die, and young women die.
Well, we're seeing that, of course, even in the kind of wars that we're in today. You know, older men telling young men how noble it is to blow themselves up, and you go, wait a second, doesn't anybody ask the question? You're older now. I mean, why wouldn't you want to go and have 72 virgins waiting on you and all that. Nobody asks that question, but that's why they pick young men. They haven't quite gotten to that point.
What do you think of the Iraq War?
Not much. I was never one of the group that thought it was great to go waltzing in there, only because for practical reasons more than anything else. It seemed like there's just so many dictatorships in the world. There's only so much you can handle. You can try to coax people into the fact that democracy is the greatest form of government there is, and it is in my mind, but a lot of people just aren't ready for it or not willing to fight for it, like America had to do in its early days. People laid down their lives for it, and it has to be something that is really, the quest is really deep within your soul.
This was a war of choice, too, and people say that that our own security was not at stake in Iraq, and that.
Well, I'm not sure. No, but history will tell us a lot of things, maybe, but that I'm not sure. I'm no expert on all that. I just know that it's how broad the whole terrorism war will go, but it's definitely going to be a mean one, and it's going to be a very timely one. So,
and the defining conflict of our time.
Yeah, whether it's Iraq or anywhere else, sort of paying for a lot of countries have looked blindly to one side, and it's kind of snuck up on everyone. But we've kind of gone through a generation in the 90s and everything, where everything was based around how many stock options you had on tech stocks and what was going on, and political rhetoric was it's the economy stupid, and we're sort of in a different generation now than we were in World War II, and where there wasn't so much the me generation, it was sort of us generation, and there we were there, and so it's important for people I think it's important for people to think about that a little bit, whether they see it with these pictures that I've been involved with, or whether they just read about it or think about it. It's important to kind of evaluate that.
What were the differences in terms of the attitude of Americans going to Iwo Jima and the Japanese caught on the island?
Well, the Americans went there knowing that the Pacific War was going full bore in our favor at that time, and of course Iwo Jima being the first island that Americans, it was actually Japanese soil, and they didn't realize it was going to be that hard. They thought it was going to be kind of a pushover, and so they were very surprised because, and I think a lot of that chain reacted as it went on into to Okinawa, which also became very a tremendous battle with a tremendous amount of civilian casualties in that one. They sort of they realized that I think that was a decision-making process of using atomic energy.
But what was interesting to me about this, and I, because of your movie, went back and looked at some documentaries. I mean, extraordinary things about it. Number one, it is 25% of all the medals of honor given to Marines were given for bravery on Iwo Jima. 25% in World War II. Think about all the brave acts that there was such a concentration of courage on that island.
Yeah, uncommon courage with a common virtue and all that. It was a very it was amazing. I mean, it's amazing. You think of all the feats that you go through, and it was the Japanese put up just a horrendous battle, and General Kuribayashi obviously was a very creative person. They thought up the idea of tunneling through the island because when you go there really isn't much there. You could see if you were out in the open, you wouldn't really have much of a chance.
It looks like a bleak place.
It's very, very bleak. I've been there 3 times. It's very interesting. It was the first time you go there and you stand on the beaches where the Marines landed. It's very emotional, a very emotional thing, because you're standing in this really deep black sand, and you're wondering, and miles of it, and you're wondering how the hell they ever got up through there with a 100-pound pack on their back and everything going. and people shooting at you from every direction. It's this amazing feat.
Interesting. To go there, you had to get the permission of the Japanese government.
Yes, it was given back to the Japanese government in the '60s, and it's now under the jurisdiction of Governor Ishihara, who is the governor. They call it the equivalent of a mayor of Tokyo, and it's under their prefecture. So even though it's 700 miles away.
Was it hard to get permission, or were they?
No, they were. He was very cooperative. It's interesting because I didn't know what his response would be. Of course, they didn't know quite what we were going to do yet, and I had this illusion in my mind that I could reinvade the island, sort of, and do it for motion pictures. But they feel
no, Mr. Eastwood, we don't care how great you are.
Yeah,
it's not going to happen.
They got sort of a blank stare there. I was going to go, but anyway, that's what I had in mind. And when I got over there, I realized that was going to be difficult, and because they lost 21,000 men in that battle, and they didn't. They think of it as a memorial because there's still 10, 12,000 unaccounted for. So, but he is a filmmaker himself. He's written some scripts and he's directed a few films, and so he was very curious and very fascinated by the idea. So he made it fine for us to go out there, and then later on, when we came back and shot some footage there for both pictures, they arranged that. And,
you actually shot it in Iceland, the battle.
Yeah, Iceland. It was a strange choice, but it actually was a good choice, and it's also a volcanic island, geothermal steam coming out of it, and the beaches are very stark areas because not a lot of vegetation there. So it looks. We shot right there on the divide, the continental divide between the European plates and the American plates, and it's very dramatic, and the beaches are black sand and deep, and everything that Iwo is.
Do you think Letters is a better movie than Flags of Our Fathers?
You know, Charlie, I don't. No, it's like, do you think your firstborn child is better than your secondborn child?
I knew you were going to say that. I knew that's what you'd say.
Well, you can't. You don't know. I mean, it's different. They're different
because it's the one being nominated.
It's different. Flags was received fairly well, and certain in a lot of areas, and it's a less linear picture. It's got flash forwards, flash back. It's very impressionistic, as opposed to Letters, which is more linear and easier to follow access, in a different way. But it's very different. The one group, they're out in the open and they're trapped in the open, and the other group is subterranean and underground. But the conflicts are different. They're slightly different, but they're both similar in some way.
But you have one really central character in Letters.
Yes.
And in the American story, Flags of Our Fathers, you have three, but more even. Right. And they're all unknown characters, right. Whereas he is so central to everything that takes place in the second film.
Yes. Yeah, there's the young conscriptee who goes out. We sort of see the general through his eyes.
You know, where did that character come from? Did that idea come from the scriptwriter, or where?
Well, it came from the screenwriter. Yeah. Iris had him, and several, because she wanted to see it through the young people's eyes, and the general is sort of a bigger than life character, but there's a lot of very accurate things. The dissension between some of the generals and admirals about the technique of defending the island was all true. General Kurabayashi knew more about America than a lot of other Japanese officers did, because he had been an envoy here in the late 20s, early 30s as a young man, and studied English up in Boston at Harvard, and then went to Canada and was envoy there for a while. He knew America, and he actually enjoyed his time here, and he was also a person who didn't advocate going to war. He thought the Americans America was too big a industrial complex to possibly go to war with. So from a practical standpoint, he didn't think it was wise.
You met members of his family?
Yes, I did. I met some. There's an Iwo Jima association in Tokyo that has members of Baron Nishi, who is one of the characters in the Islands, who won the Olympics gold medal in the Olympics in equestrian. His son is a member of that, and Kuribashi's grandson, and everyone. There's a large group of people, of veterans who keep the memorial alive. Interesting in war, and you made 2 films from both sides, and you see courage and you see a range of human emotion. In war, we tend to demonize our enemy. Sure. And not see any sort of redeeming value or character in them, and not understand or appreciate or think about the fact they have families, they have lives, and that they have character and courage as well. Sure. Their mothers feel the same heartache as American mothers do when they get that information that their sons are no longer coming back, or the husband's no longer a chance of them coming back. It's the same emotions. It's just a little bit different culture, and between the 2 films together, I was trying to be an anti-war statement. Yeah, it's hard to make any war picture and make it a pro-war statement. Yeah. It's just not. You always wish that mankind would reach the level of intelligence that they could avoid it, but history doesn't prove out that at the present time. Yeah, it certainly hasn't. Both of these are anti-war movies beyond the fact they show the idiocy of war. And this was a case in which the Japanese knew what the end result was going to be, and they knew they had to die for the country. Yeah. Yeah, that's a tough sell. Yeah. That would be a tough sell for any of us any of our lives as we know it, to be told you're going here and don't plan on coming back. That would be a very tough sell, but that was they approached it from the honor and a lot of different things. They looked at it in those days. I'm not sure how the current generation would feel about that, but our current generation here has probably got a little different mentality too. It is said the Japanese, I don't know how much you talk to them about how they feel about war, but they're becoming a bit more militaristic now because of the role they play in the world, and because they're worried about North Korea, and they're worried about their region. China is growing as the regional power, if not the second superpower in the world. Sure. Well, they probably more in that particular era. They had a military expansionist government that was very, very aggressive, but now they're probably looking at it more from a defensive thing, because they are surrounded, like you say. Yeah. They had never made a film about Iwo Jima. No. It's not taught in history books. It's not known. None of our actors knew. Even Ken Watanabe, who has been, is in the late 40s and has been around, he knew nothing about it until they started researching this thing. And then they started going back and reading. There's been some articles written on it over the years, nothing major. The first book that I read on it was just a very small, thin book that had pictures that he had drawn, along with letters to his daughter and his son and the general and his wife, the general, when he was the envoy in the United States in the late 20s, and then again when he was stationed on Iwo Jima, where his letters got more fatalistic. He was in a whole different frame of mind then. You hope people come away from seeing these 2 movies with what? Other than an experience at the theater in which they've been told a story about an important event, and they have some insight into, what went into this critical event. Well, I think you just gave my answer for me. No, I think that's. I just wanted to state the obvious. I'm sorry. Well, beyond the obvious, that's kind of where it lies. Really, picture making is telling characters, telling stories, and letting characters unravel for everybody to analyze, and then with maybe the ironies of what you're alluding to is that there's winners and there's losers, but there's no real winners in this situation, because though Japan, in losing, did what I think everybody would dream, certain people now would dream they could do for Iraq, is they could democratize it and become a huge economical power. But the Japanese people are tremendously innovative and tremendously energetic, and they made a lot out of it. Everybody hopes that the world could expand like that and progress like that, but we gotta wait and see.
You want people, though, to see this as an anti-war film.
Oh, absolutely. I didn't set out to. I certainly didn't set out to glamorize either side of it. I know I grew up with and I'm sure you've seen most of them too. The very propagandistic films in World War II. The enemy was always terrible, kind of like you were saying earlier. And it turns out that their side had the same propaganda about us. They were the horrible Americans coming on, and so everybody had the propaganda.
Savages, they say.
Yeah, and everybody learns about it, learns otherwise as they sort of mature. But yeah, I don't want it to be a pro-war thing, and I don't want to show the violence of war or any part of it as being a glamorous, happy, fun-loving thing. Not like, I mean, and I've been in
just for the glorification of heroes.
Yes, I mean, I've been in films in my early career where I had the smart dialogue and could pick somebody off of a tower with a rifle. But
make my day.
Yes, exactly, and that was fun at that particular time, but it's not what I'm interested in telling now. And I think the fact that the violence of war is very painful.
What are you interested in telling now, beyond this story?
I'm just mainly interested in showing, approaching subjects that I haven't done before, and that maybe that haven't been made, at least that don't follow a pattern particularly. I'm not looking to follow to stay in genres particularly. I'm sure the next film I'll do will be some fit in, if you want to call it a genre, some other genre or something else. I really don't know. I just every story. The last 4 movies I've done, Mystic River and $1 Million Baby, and then Flags and Letters, have all had a little different twist. They've kept it interesting for me. Has kept me challenged, and I think. Hopefully there's other pieces of material out there that are challenging as well. You know?
We are right where people are so fascinated by you at this moment. And you don't talk about this often, but I want you to talk about it with me. I mean, people look at the 4 movies that you've just made and they say, I mean, film critics, everybody, movie audiences, they're just beside themselves in praise about where you are as a creative artist. You must understand that and the process that has brought you there.
Well, I guess I guess I'm still working at an age in life when a lot of people are
that's true.
Interested in the golf ball, going from right to left or left to right. I don't. But I think, and a lot of people ask a common question is, why at this time in your life are you doing this? Well, I think because I just have different opinions about things, or more added knowledge about certain things, and I want to explore certain things that I never did as a younger man, and that's the way it should be with everybody. I think you should constantly
grow.
Constantly grow, yeah. Constantly expand your horizons and grow. I suppose if I'd have I made some choices along the way, I'd say dating back to Italy, if I'd have stayed there and said I'm just going to stay in the Western genre and knock off some paycheck movies, that I would have been out of business a long time ago. And then when I got back to the States, if I'd have stayed in the detective genre, I suppose I'd have been out of business there a long time ago. I think that the secret is, for me anyway, and I would certainly recommend it to other people, is to always be, looking to kind of open up and expand the horizons and enjoy life and enjoy the new things that you can express.
And be open to new ideas and build on the past, but look to the future.
Absolutely.
But you are you're at the best you've ever been, and everybody knows it now. Yeah. Do we simply say, there are a lot of people who made, Orson Welles, for example, made his best movies when he was very young and never...
Well, his very best movie was his first.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but
you keep getting better.
But that's just different. That's just the way fate directs things. Sometimes, and fate does direct a lot of things in everyone's career. You can't really plan on a lot of things. You say, well, I'm going to have a career and I'm going to do this at this period and this at another period. And it just doesn't work that way. You have to kind of, you have to see little brass rings as they go, and you have to grab them real quick and exploit them.
And tell me if I'm right or wrong about this. My sense is you're not renouncing anything you've ever done. You're not saying, no. I now look back at that and wonder why I did it. You simply say, this is the growth pattern that happened to me, and I like where I am, and when I was there, I was happy to be there.
This is what I knew at that time. I was happy to be there. And if... I always joke about it. You ran a clip of Play Misty for Me, my first directorial job 38 years ago. And I thought, well, I guess I could go back and remake that, but I'd probably wreck it because it wouldn't have the same look, feeling as I felt then towards it. So I might look at it from a total different point of view, and it might not be half as good.
But you feel... you're just better. We should all get better at what we do.
You think so. You'd think so. And I was always curious. Years ago, one of the directors that I admired, along with many when I was growing up, was Billy Wilder, and he stopped directing in his 60s. And I always thought, why Billy Wilder? He's the guy who did, Double Indemnity and Sunset Boulevard and all these wonderful movies. You think, why isn't he doing movies? But maybe it's because his writing partners faded away or whatever. I can't tell the reasons, but I always thought that was a shame. And even Frank Capra and a lot of people who I knew slightly in his later life, he always seemed very lucid. It seemed like a shame that they weren't continuing onward and upward.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Let me come back to this movie. This is... The Second Letters was written by a Japanese woman who did what? Was she involved as a consultant to you?
No.
She was a writer?
Actually, I went to Paul Haggis, who was working on Flags, and I says, Paul, I don't have any money, but I've got this crazy thought. How about if we looked at it from the other side as well, just to see how it is, what life was like for people like that who defended the island in this unique way, because... whether people like it or not, mankind seems to be very creative in war. For some reason, war brings out the creative. There's more inventions happen during wartime and all this stuff, which is sad to say, but that's just the way it is. But and I said, I can't. You're getting to be a hot writer now, and I can't afford to pay
and director as well.
Pay you for this project. But I said, is there somebody you're mentoring? Do you teach at some classes, writing classes, or what have you? Could you find somebody that maybe you could mentor along? And he said, a few days later, he called me and said, I found a person, a Japanese American lady, and she's very interesting, very good researcher, and she's got some interesting ideas for this. And so I sent her over all the material I had, and she went and dug up all the material she could find, and there we were. And in a matter of weeks, she had turned in a script that I liked. So,
has your style of directing changed over the years? Are you more anything in these films, even more than you were in Misty or Unforgiven? I don't mean Misty, Unforgiven or Mystic River.
I don't know. I think they are different. I think Unforgiven and Mystic River are very different. I think the style depends. I think the story dictates the style a lot. The objectives to overcome, to tell the story, to unfold the characters, I think are very. Each picture sort of calls for its own feel, and so I think the style is always changing. But I guess there are certain things that I like better. I like certain lenses better. But every picture has a certain look, a certain printing, textures, and what have you. And so you just kind of go. It's not a brain surgery thing. It's it's just kind of a thing from the feeling. I don't use my brain so much. I try to use my heart and or gut or whatever your person wants to call it, because you try to analyze things, stories. How do they move you? You don't. If a story, you read a story and it moves you, you don't say, well, now why is this moving? You just kind of let it take you. Let it take you away. When I read Mystic River as a book, it just kind of took me right away. I was in it, and pretty soon I had to finish it. One of those I couldn't wait to get home at night and finish the chapters, or read a lot of chapters of it, or finish it up. And so right away I knew that was intriguing. If I could make a movie that would intrigue an audience the same way as it was intriguing me as a book, then I would be in business.
What intrigued you about Flags of Our Fathers?
The mystery of it all. I had done this in a fictional way with Bridges of Madison County, but in a biographical way, a son who grows up knowing his father was in the war, didn't know he'd won the Silver Star, the Navy Cross, or any of these.
This was Bradley.
This is John Bradley, and because John Bradley just didn't want to talk about it. And I've talked to a lot of EWO veterans during and prior to making Flags, and an awful lot of them are that way. And only in recent years, as they're getting older now, and I guess getting close to thinking about their mortality, they kind of start coming out and talking about it. And his father never did, because he just wanted to settle down and be left alone, run a business and raise a family.
What was it about the conflict that made him that way? The horrendousness of it?
They're all so young. The average age was 19 years old, and you take the average 19-year-old here is worrying about some football game or something, but to be all swept up and sent off into island campaigns in the Pacific or in European theater, and be shot at and blown up and have people, friends killed right next to you. It's a tremendous impact on them and how they handle it. And they didn't have the psychiatric evaluations that they have today. They were just told to go home and get over it. And most of them had to, and they depended on their friends or wives, or if they had money and could afford some medical attention or psychiatric attention, they might. But in those days, there was less sophistication about it. It was just get over it, fellas. And so his way of getting over it was to not talk about it at all. But I find that most real combat veterans don't really expound on it a lot. You might find like some clerk typists that will talk a lot about how it was over there, but the real vets,
people who are on the front lines, and
the real frontline guys, they just kind of it wasn't really great fun. So that's all I have to say about it. Yeah. But you can imagine growing up, Jim Bradley growing up as a young boy, he'd probably love to have heard some great exploits of Iwo Jima, and but he never got them.
Yeah. What most people didn't understand, and I think what made this book resonate, in addition to the bravery there, was that how the flag had been used, the raising of the flag, which is a story you tell.
Right.
And the second thing they don't realize is that there were actually two raisings of the flag.
Right.
In the film and in the book, it's because...
Yeah, well, the raising of the flags was the thing that made that Joe Rosenthal photograph so great, is that it was just a matter-of-fact raising.
Yeah.
the first flag, they raised it, and then the guys stopped, and they all posed for pictures afterwards and raised their rifles up and what have you. But the Rosenthal's, they were just putting it up, so that's why the picture is so brilliant, is because nobody's looking in the camera.
Yeah,
It just sort of represented 6 people exerting a tremendous effort towards doing a job, and it became the symbol, a great symbol, and still probably one of the great symbols of World War II. And then
well, there's a monument in Washington as well.
Sure, and it's yeah. Then they came back, and the government got this brilliant idea, which was brilliant in a way, to bring them back and make them sort of stars and exploit them around.
Because for a good reason, the money was needed to fight the rest of the war.
Money was needed, but in that exploitation, it was very impacting on the 3 fellas, because not only had the other 3 fellas died that had been with them, but they come back and they're treated like kings, and they're on a constant banquet and booze circuit, and so they were at that age in life. I'm sure that had as much impact almost as the war.
And in fact, that tragedy after the war for 2 of them. You know.
Yes, they
never survived the trauma of it all.
They never quite. They were built up to such a level of expectation that they didn't know quite where it was all going to lead, but they thought it was going to lead to something great. And of course, with John Bradley, it did, because he kind of knew that it was. He kind of knew the direction he was going in, but the other 2 got wrapped up in the booze and fun of it, and they would end up disappointed after the war. Everybody started forgetting about it, and people no longer cared about what they had done on the flag raising, and bonds were no longer being sold, and everybody thought, okay, so what?
Yeah. I may be wrong about this, but in watching Letters, I did not see the raising of the flag at all. There was never a scene in which I saw the. Was that deliberate?
Sure.
What was it? Why?
Well, we see it from in a distance up there, because
way distance.
Yeah, I guess because I sort of assumed that that everybody knew about the raising of the flag at this point, and that.
But the Japanese must have watched it and said something or felt something. And
well,
Karabachi was.
They do see that it's up there. I mean, the guy says they've taken Mount Suribachi.
Yeah.
And then there's a lot of angst as what to do. And of course, General Kurabashi wanted everybody to migrate to the northern end of the island, where they'd regroup and make their stand there. And then there was other generals and officers, senior officers, who felt that we must die an honorable death. Let's just kill ourselves.
Just do it now.
And he didn't believe that. He believed that dead soldiers were not useful soldiers. And so he was a much more practical person than that. But in the confusion of it all, a lot of crazy things happened.
When you began to do all the research that you did you look at other war movies and say, I want to go to school on this. I want to look at Saving Private Ryan and what Stephen did on the beaches of Normandy. Mm-hmm. And do you go to school on other movies? Well,
I've certainly seen that movie, and it was a really good film. And but I've seen a lot of war movies. I remember when I grew up on going to all those movies. Bataan, they had movies on Bataan, movies on Corregidor, movies on Wake Island, movies on the Philippines, and then Tarawa, and so I saw all of them. They all had sort of the same propaganda, where we've got to do this, and then a lot of the Navy battles and what have you. And even in the early part of the war, they had the Flying Tigers movies and stuff like that. They were all very romantic, and the enemy were terrible guys, and our guys were all guys struggling to get over. And it was propaganda, and as it should have been in those days, and we were selling people that this was something that should be done. But then you get to a certain point, and now in hindsight, 60 some odd years later, you figure, okay, now let's look at it the way it really was for everybody involved. And if you take it back to the kind of the nucleus of the family, where mothers and fathers are not seeing their sons come home. It gets very, very painful. It's not, the glamour part of it goes real quick.
You have done everything that one might want to do in the world of making movies. There is
maybe a lot of people would be satisfied with that, and I am to some degree. I've been very lucky. You can, and no matter how hard you work in life, you've got to have a certain amount of fate has to kind of come along and work with you, and if fate doesn't. If fate takes you in the wrong direction somewhere, you can't do anything about that. But you have to be able to make decisions and be very decisive. I think the whole process of making film is based upon decision making and making decisions, and that's the way it is in life. You have to make those decisions and pursue them when the opportunity arises. If you dwell, maybe you dwell too long, and the opportunity, you miss the opportunity. I've been very lucky, and I knock on vinylite or oak.
Oak it is. This is oak. This is real oak.
We've got. You have to understand that too. I think you have to be appreciative of that.
There is also this. People will say that that it's true in golf, as you know. The more confidence you have, the more relaxed you are, the better, more likely you are to hit the ball well. Are you operating now, and certainly going back to, go back to, it was true in Unforgiven, but even if you look at these last 4 films, you are operating with more confidence, more ease, more than you've ever been.
Yeah, I think the golf analogy is interesting. I mean, we joke about it, but really it's one of the one sports where you play your own game.
Yeah.
And you may be playing opposite somebody, or even as an opponent of sort, but you're playing your own game, and you have to trust your swing. And you, at a certain point in life, you learn certain things about it, and then you have to trust it. And when you don't trust it, you know what happens. Bad things come into it.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and it's a great analogy for life. Is just play your own ball. Don't worry about what everybody else is doing out there. You play your own game, and then and you'll do okay with your own game, and somebody else will do okay with theirs. That's just the way it is.
And take risk.
Yeah. Oh yeah. You can't. You must always be willing to take risks because if there's you can find a million reasons why not to do something. I remember a director once telling an actress was going on and on about intellectualizing about why she couldn't do this. And he says, I can tell you a million reasons why you shouldn't be doing this part. But he says, right now we're here and we're going to do it, so let's go. And so she shut up and they made the shot. But it was, they were trying to take it in circles. And these are little vignettes you kind of keep in your mind because you might be saying them yourself to someone someday.
Yeah, and finally there is this, which I've learned from you and we've talked about in this conversation. It is, in a sense, don't overanalyze things. Lead with your heart and with your instinct and with where your emotional intelligence takes you.
Well, you must always remember what emotion grabbed you first. If you read a book and it becomes very appealing to you, you have to think of what was the thing that grabbed me and why would you want to talk yourself out of that. If you think around it enough, you can take it around in circles and take yourself completely off track. And there's been a million cases where people have started motion picture projects and they've as Don Siegel used to say, kill them with improvement. So you can start going on. Yeah. I remember with Unforgiven, I was rewriting the script. I called up David Peoples, who had written the script, and I said, I've just got a few little changes I want to make. I'll make them, but then I'll submit them back to you so you can be happy with them too. And I started doing that. I started working on it for about a week or so, and finally I realized I was really screwing this up bad. So I called him up and I said, all that stuff about changes, forget it. I'm going with your first draft.
Flags of Our Fathers, Letters from Iwo Jima. Letters from Iwo Jima is already winning awards, but there are 2 films come from the same place, from the heart and mind of Clint Eastwood. I am, as always, pleased to see him. Thank you, and honored to call him my friend. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Charlie. It's been a real pleasure.
Clint Eastwood for the hour. Thank you for joining us. See you next time.